So now we're going to talk about the concept of a list. So, so far I've gone through the idea of variables in Python. So let's suppose I have 5 people and their ages. So I could represent or store that information in a few different ways. Let's suppose the first way, for example, could be to just create 5 variables. And I could say something like age 1 is equal to 30, age 2 is equal to 21, age 3 is equal to 30, age 4 is equal to 15, and age 5 is equal to 65. Right, and I can run all of these, and of course my data is all stored. Now, if I wanted to, let's say, find the average age of this data set, that would take me some time, because I would need to do age. First of all, I'm going to create a variable average age, and then I'm going to create parentheses to emphasize where my computation is going to be. I have age 1 plus age 2 plus age 3 plus age 4 plus age 5. And I can divide that by, of course, 5 to get the average age. And whoops. See, this is what happens when you misspell a variable name. It yells at you and says that that variable name has not been found. Okay. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that we get 32 as the average age, which is possible. But the thing we got to remember is that these are integers. And so what I need to do is ensure that at least one of the numbers, is a float, in other words, a decimal point. And doing that, as we can see, it changes the average age now, because before it was 32, but it chopped off the decimal point because it assumed it was all integers. When we put in at least one of the numbers in the calculation as a decimal, what we call a floating point, then it assumes the whole thing is a floating point, and we can properly now, we can get the correct average age. I think, however, that here it rounds. Let's see, if I put 3, if it'll do this to 3 decimal places. No, it's just still 32.2. So anyway, moral of the story, we can obviously store data in this manner, but this is a little bit of a pain. So as it turns out, Python has a collection of what we refer to as data structures, and we'll see if we get into more advanced ones as we progress in this course. But the basic one that you should know leaving this course is what's called a list. In general programming languages, this is also called an array, and when we get to R in your next course, you'll learn that this structure is the same thing as what we call a vector. So whatever you want to call it, the way that we can think about it is kind of like a mailbox system, where what we do is we set up a list in Python by using this bracket notation. And I'm going to just assign it a variable called ages. And what I'm going to do is manually put my data in here as such. And so as we can see, this is a neat little way to store the data, because I no longer now need to create 5 different variables. I've already put them all in a list under the same variable name. Now, how do I refer to a specific area in the list? Well, first, take a peek and see what's in ages and load that. You'll see that we have 30, 21, 30, 15, 65, which is, of course, our ages. I can change, I can ask what is in a specific slot in the list. Let's say I use the number 1, okay, and it says 21. That's this position right here. Why isn't it this position? Because Python does what's called index by 0. So it assumes that when you put this data in, the number 0 will be assigned to this position, the number 1 will be assigned to this position, the number 2, 3, and 4. So even though I'm looking at number 1, what I really want, if I want the first position, is number 0. In other words, to get a specific piece of information out from my list, what I do is I provide the name of the list, I do as a bracket, I give the position in the list from where I want to grab a piece of information, and then I close the bracket. If I do that, as you can see, I get 30. Now, suppose I did range 1 to 3. So let's see what that gives me. It didn't like that. That's okay. So here's the moral of the story. As you can see, even though I have 5 elements, this is going to give me the last one. What if I put in a number that's not in the list? In other words, number 5. As you can see, I get an error, and that error says list index out of range. What that just simply means is I gave it a position number that doesn't exist in the list itself. So when you get this error, all Python is telling you is, hey, you gave me an index. I can't, there's nothing there. That mailbox number basically doesn't exist. So, and that's the way you should think about this, is as a mailbox system, right? Where this is assigned mailbox 0, mailbox 1, mailbox 2, etc. Now you can change things in the mailboxes by just simply using what specific position you want to change and then assigning it the new number. So let's suppose I do this, and then I check to see what's in ages. And as you can see, it changed the age 15 to 20. Originally, it was set to 15, if you remember. Now, that's updated to 20. So very flexible in this. I'm going to change this back, by the way, to 15, because what I want to do is illustrate the power of lists, or where lists really shine, which is using them in functions. So as we mentioned, I wanted to find the average age, which we did this the long way up here. As it turns out, there's a quicker, or there's a shorter way to do this. I could use the sum function and just pass the list in there. And if you do that, you'll see that you get the summation, right? But then I'm going to divide it by 5.0 because there's 5 of them, 0.0 because I want that. And then as you can see, I get the average age. I don't remember if the mean, no, I don't think the, I always mix up these two here between Python and R. The perils of knowing more than one programming language here. I believe you need to, yeah, no, that's not going to work. So you need to import a special package, but nonetheless, okay. The power of the vectors, I'm sorry, of the lists really shine when you are looking to pass them into functions to operate on. So as we see, doing this the long way was kind of irritating because we had to work with 5 different variables. This, on the other hand, is much cleaner. And as we'll see later in the course, we can actually import data from files to load into these variables, and then just work directly with that data on the variable names. So anyway, this is just a brief breakdown of the lists. By the way, another function we use quite frequently with the list is the len function, which tells us the length of the function, which just tells us how many elements are in the list. As you can see, we have 5 elements. That's because we had 5 numbers in there. You're not just restricted to numbers, by the way. You could say something along the lines of names. Bob, Joe, Ahmed, Sue, something like that, right? And now, if you take a peek in names, you'll see that those names are in the list. So very nice flexibility here with lists. We'll see how we'll use this in our limit lecture because we will be using it, all right? But in the next video, I'm actually going to go through how to work with what we like to call logical conditions, or what we like to call logic control statements, which help us gain a little bit more of a set of controls that we can use to manipulate our code in more of a logical manner. So we'll get to that in the next video.